Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Maitland City Council meeting of February 27th, 2023. If you would please remember to silence your phones and things that might make noises during this meeting. This evening we have an invocation. We're going to start off with Dale McDonald. Mr. McDonald, please lead us in an invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May everybody, if you would, please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for providing us the opportunity to gather and forever to be grateful for the efforts and the sacrifices that our first responders make every single day and night and help us sleep better every night. Heavenly Father, please also keep this group, this body, continuing to use wisdom and prudence in things they consider this evening. Lord, we appreciate all that you provided for us, the blessings that the city of Maitland has that is beyond any favor that we're merited. We ask these things in your most holy name, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Dale. If you would please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll get right to it. Mr. Wagner, is any old business?
No, sir.
Okay. We have a consent agenda with 6 items. Does anybody wish to pull, any member of council wish to pull any items from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to pull 3 and 6, please.
3 and 6 will come down, where we will put them under decisions? Or?
Yeah.
It's the last thing, and they become the last.
Okay.
Second 2 and 3 under decisions.
2 and 3 under decisions.
3 and 2.
All right, that leaves us with item 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the consent agenda. Would anybody in the public like to comment on items 2 through 6, or 2 through 6? Seeing none, let's close the public period, and a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Warren, please call the roll.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, we approved most of the consent agenda. Let us move on to the public period. This is the period when anybody can address the council on any item that's actually not on the agenda. If you have any item pertaining to anything in the city of Maitland that you'd like to unburden yourself on, please approach the podium. Seeing none, let's close the public period. All right, our first decision item is a memorial regarding Sharon and Selma, our former city manager. Mark, would you please introduce the item?
Yes, sir. As you all know, myself and city staff, city council members, members of the public, and members of the community have expressed interest in memorializing Sharon in one way or another since her passing May 30th of last year. We bounced several ideas around. I don't think I need to go into any detail for those of us that knew her and worked closely with her, members of the community that had the pleasure of working with her, about what her accomplishments were with the city. Those are included in my staff report. But as the discussions have progressed over the last 10 months, there have been some ideas that have been floated in terms of how to appropriately memorialize Sharon's dedication to the city. A couple of those things that we talked about were a dedication memorial bench in Independence Square, sort of our town square of the city, naming the fountain in Independence Square after her, or the Fountain Plaza, or the Northern Seating Area Plaza in Independence Square, having a memorial to her there. We've also talked about the viewing deck at Fort Maitland Park, which is going to be wrapping up here in the next couple months to have a memorial there. And one of the things that came up later was naming of our east-west bike trail in memory of Sharon. as we've sort of gone through this, obviously going through these from top to bottom, the memorial bench is relatively easy and straightforward, available to any member of the public. And the bench placement in Independence Square would be a little over $2,000. Items 2 through 5, the naming of park or park features is encompassed by the park naming policy. So this would involve the city council or staff filling out an application, presenting it to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, holding a public hearing so they could make recommendations back to the city council. This process typically takes 3 to 5 months depending on how those meeting schedules fall, and the cost varies depending on what you would actually want to put in the park. As part of the city's overall bike ped network, our East-West Trail, as we've been calling it, the East-West Trail primarily for grant purposes. It doesn't have a real name. It runs from the Domerick neighborhoods through the community park, over the pedestrian bridge on I-4, and right now it terminates at the base of that bridge. The last piece of that East-West Trail is in the capital plan for this year. To complete that, over to Fennell Street, where we have the trail that takes us down to Fennell Park, so it basically reaches from east to west across the city. So this trail has no formal name, so like I said, we refer to it as the East-West Trail. But it's not considered a park or a park feature. It's not part of a park in the city. So as we talked about this at staff over the last couple of months, I consulted people that knew her best as far as what they felt would be appropriate to her. We have department heads here in the city that had the pleasure of working with Sharon in all of her different capacities in the city for over the last 20 years. And they said if I was asking them for the recommendation, it would be the East-West Bike Trail. She enjoyed biking. She was proud of the accomplishments that we've done during her tenure as city manager, to complete the Sandspur portion, to make sure that the pedestrian bridge was completed, as there were changes, you might all recall, to that project over I-4, and finally getting that last spur in, that's going to run from the base over to Fennell Street. So she enjoyed biking. She enjoyed biking with her daughter and son-in-law and her grandchildren, and she especially enjoyed the fact that the trail was created in Maitland, for Maitland, connected parks for its residents, and she thought a lot of that. So since we've been bandying this around for about the last year, we sort of felt it was time to at least bring this forward so we have at least a discussion at city council level on what direction we should take. If you ask staff's recommendation, as included in the staff report, we would recommend that the bike trail be named in honor of Sharon, but we're open to any type of idea as we're approaching the 1-year memorial of her passing, to do something, to make a decision on what direction we want to go. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I think we all, would agree that Sharon was a local hero, and something we worked with closely for a long time. The residents knew her very well. She was very happy to get out among the people, and that made her happy to work with people. And the residents knew her, the staff knew her, we all knew her, and the recommendation that comes from the department heads, because you all work most closely with her day in, day out. I mean, I think we ought to give that some great weight in deciding how we want to memorialize Sharon. So I appreciate that last inspired suggestion about the East-West Trail. Does anybody have any questions about this for Mark?
I do. These are just for Mark, right? Mark, on any map, would there be a bike trail map and say, this is the Sharon on some trail, or is it just going to be a general knowledge of that the city just going to call it that?
Yeah, the scale of the maps that are produced regionally don't allow for names of trails. They just have a heavy blue line. We work with our other jurisdictions surrounding us just to show how everything connects. So they're just shown with a heavy blue line. We have those on our website. So there's not, that scale doesn't lend it to a trail name. So the way we envisioned it, there would be markers at the beginning and end of the trail, at waypoints along the trail where people would get on and off, just stating that it's, you know, the Sharon and Selma Memorial Trail. Maybe have a little QR code. If somebody was curious about who Sharon was, they would be able to scan it, and it would take them directly to the memorial page we set up on our website, so they would be able to at least understand why the city council did what they did. And that can be done with anything here in terms of memorializing her. I think, you know, in this day and age, the QR code is something that everybody's familiar with. You just scan it, puts a nice, you know, a nice remembrance on a plaque, and then you have a QR code so people can get a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I use them on all my business cards, so get it right on the website.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I know, and I'm not a big biker, but all the other trails have names, right? Like the one in Sanford, I'm not Sanford, the one in Seminole County. Do they all have names?
There's the Orlando Urban Trail that goes south here, and there's the West Orange Trail.
West Orange Trail, that's what I was looking for, yeah.
Seminole,
Katy Way Trail.
Cross, they call
That's-
it
I'm just kinda wondering if people- if-
Cross Seminole Trail is what they call them.
And I'm just wondering if that might be a little too much for a name of a trail to say, the Sharon and Samo Trail, you know, and it's like, oh, let's go biking. Where do you want to go biking? Let's go biking, Sharon and Samo Trail. So that's just kind of, you know, I mean, there's so much positive. I just want to bring out what the negative of it might be. So that's my only concern for the trail part. But yeah, like you said, we could do that with really any of these. And I also reached out right before I got here and talked to Maria, and you know, Maria had suggested something within the square, since, you know, that was, since she worked here and this is where she spent most of her time in this area. And then, you know, talking to some other staff, you went from Sharon wouldn't want anything to, you know, there's a joke about every place in here, somebody has a room. And the conference room between Sharon and Mark's office was always known as the Sharon and Samo conference room. So, I mean, you know,
Yeah, on
there's
that
a lot.
point, you know, that's what, you know, when Sharon was with us, that's one of the things that she always joked about, was having that conference room named after her. And as we all know, there's always a little bit of truth in a joke, and she said that if there's only one thing that she wanted to be wanting that conference room named after her when she retired from the city. So we're in the process of doing that anyway. That-
Yeah, I was
that
gonna say,
doesn't
we could
require
do
council-
both.
That doesn't require council
Right.
action, so it's in process right now.
But here's kind of what I want to discuss also is, I don't think we're really in a hurry with this. What I would like to see is us to maybe table this and bring it back at another time. And maybe Mr. Sargent could publicize this out on, you know, Facebook and all the other areas that we hit, or emails, or whatever it is, and just let people know that, you know, it's the so-and-so meeting, we're going to have this discussion. Let people come out and say, you know, I support this, or, I mean, you just hit it, that so many of our citizens and residents were so close to Sharon. I would feel like we need to give them a voice also, just let them come out and kind of, I mean, be part of it, you know, to feel good about it. Since we're not in a hurry for any of this. I know we're going on the 1-year anniversary, but, you know, I'd like to do it right and not rush it, like, you know, sit here right now and go through 6 of these and go, which one do I like the best last minute, you know? So maybe table it, go home, think about it, we push it for another night, and try to see if we can get some residents out here to, you know, either say, oh, I like this one, or maybe somebody has a better one. Maybe somebody will even say, hey, I like to give, you know, $10,000 to the Sharon and Samo, you know, bench in Independence Square, whatever it be. So, just my thought.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of Mark?
I don't have any questions, but I don't know when you discuss it.
Yeah, let's just take questions now, and then we'll take public comment, and then bring it back up for discussion. All right, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment then. Does anybody from the public want to address us on this? Please come up and give us your name and address, and let us know your
I
thoughts.
didn't expect to come up so soon. I'm Elizabeth Wimberly. I live at 2315 Mohawk Trail in Maitland. Wow, that was a really hard loss when we lost Sharon, and I might not keep it composure up here because I did not look at the whole agenda and did not see that we would be discussing this tonight. But the first hurricane that I had to go through without my husband here in town, she helped me, and you gave me bags into my car, and I was so grateful because I was preparing on my own. I've since prepared for a few hurricanes since then, but I called John last time, what do I do? Sharon saw me through that, and as I talked to my friends in Winter Park, I was like, oh, you wouldn't believe what they're doing over here. Oh, they're not doing anything like that over here. She was a deliberate leader. She was she served with dignity and grace. She thought things through very slowly, and I think that we should show her the respect to further vet the ideas, and I think that you really will find potentially a sponsor to help underwrite whatever more you do. So that's just what I want to throw out there. I really support that dance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
They all moved 108 Tangelo Court. I mean, other than John and I'm not sure Dave, we've known her so well for so long. And the stories, as you can tell, will go on indefinitely. But I can't help but believe that it would be appropriate, while she may not like the attention, that we actually specifically designate something and recognize her. I was rather, Mark and I have spoken about this, about even that plaza, you know, that by Independence Lane. Because those of us that were around know that Independence Lane would not have happened. I mean, Independence Square would not have happened without Sharon. And so recognizing that, as we all do, that something that here in the square is tangible. I mean, the East-West Bike Trail, of course. She did love to bike a lot. And but the ability to recognize something specific and tangible for her, I believe, is way appropriate. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Anybody else like to address council on this? Okay, seeing none, let's close the public period, and discussion will be in order. Any thoughts about this?
So I think that, and as you stated correctly, John, we all respected her and enjoyed spending time with her and her dedication to the city. Was always impressed with her ability to deal with the public. So I think all the nice things we could say about her, I think we would all echo that. I think that the naming of something after a person is challenging. I think, and we've all been, or a lot of us have been here when people have come up and asked to do that for other people. The parks policy and the naming of parks. I'm not sure. I understand, Mark, the distinction of the trail versus the park, but it's kind of, I'm not totally sure I see the distinction, but I'll agree with you for purposes of the way the code is written. So I think that having a plaque, a bench, something like that, also given what I understand her respects to have been with regard to this, seems maybe the right balance. And Mark and I have talked about this on several occasions. I think we all have kind of what stands out to us as something is what we thought was appropriate. I mean, and I think we could all sit here and I'm not sure we could ever agree, all of us on a consensus, but I think, John, your sentiment of that those who maybe were closest to her and of the staff that knew her the best and her family input would be sort of I would give more value to on that front of what I personally think was what I remember her by as far as my last projects and things with her. So
I think if the decision is that that trail was sort of her, kind of what people think she valued the most on that, I think some sort of bench, plaque, something around that trail would be, sounds to me, the most appropriate, with then, like you said, a QR code that would take people to kind of a story about her love of biking and her dedication to the city and things like that. So that would be the way I see it, and I think that to Vance's point about continuing this, I think that it sounds like, Mark, you sort of had those discussions with staff internally. I don't know if you've reached out to her family at all. I mean, that'd be something that I would think would be potentially of input as sort of what those who knew her best would say what she would want. But I would go for the plaque, bench, and based on what you're saying, around the trail aspect. Don't know if anyone agrees with that or thinks I'm...
Well, I guess I'm just for clarification. So you mean in lieu of naming the trail itself, just putting a
Right.
plaque or some recognition on the trail? Okay.
Yeah, and if, I mean, look, like I said, again, we could all probably tell a story like, hey, my memory of Sharon over the last whatever was us working on this together or that together, what I felt she was most dedicated to, whether it's the park or any number of parks or a trail or whatever. But it sounds like the staff has given thought to this, and the trail, given her interest in biking and whatever seems the most appropriate, and so I'm going with that. I'm setting aside my own, like I said, when I started this, I thought, in my memory of her was the boat house, converting the boathouse, and that was the last project that I worked with her on. And so personally, that was what I had thought, but I can't profess that my idea is any better than anybody else's. So it seems like staff has looked at this, and so I would give more weight to that in my own opinion. And so I would say that the trail, a bench with a plaque or something at that trail that gave a link to a story about her seemed appropriate. In lieu of naming the trail, yes.
Okay.
I, for the most part, defer on a lot of discussions about Sharon. You were the least amount of time of everyone, and defer on what she would like or want most to almost anybody else in the room but me. But a couple of things stand out. One, when I was speaking to Mark about the agenda, some of the things Mike said initially came up to me, just working through, like, well, why is it different with parks and so on and so forth. But one thing I kind of came to working through it out loud, as you all know that's how I process, is by talking, is that in the other instances we have of someone wanting to name a park or something after someone, there was no alternative of also putting a statue or a plaque of that person. To me, the rigmarole, to use a technical term, that you would have to go through to reverse a naming decision if for some reason history told a different story, would be the same with a statue or a bench as it would be naming or renaming a trail. Arguably, it'd be more difficult to take down a statue, take down a bench, take down something like that than it would be to rename a trail. So as a logical kind of argument, I don't know that I think that if I have an issue with the naming, kind of thinking about that, any more so than naming a bench or something after someone. I am always in favor of honoring what someone says their wishes are, although no one says those things, generally speaking, especially in a casual work context with a real serious intention. But it seems that the things I know and have been told, that the things that would probably give her most discomfort, in addition to just having this conversation in the first place, is having money spent on something. I think that's one of the benefits of naming, which doesn't cost anything. And because, it's one of her priorities always, and also not belaboring this, I think would probably not be what, if I can take the liberty to say that she or really anyone would want. And so those are my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, that's that's, your input on this is valid as anybody else's on this. I mean, the thing about Sharon was that it's hard to name a thing for her because she impacted virtually everything in the city. So there's not, it's hard to say, well, a trail is any better than a park, is any better than a boathouse, is any, because she really was involved in all of it and made it all happen. You kind of like the idea of, initially when we thought about, what would be a good memorial, you kind of think, well, it's a nice peaceful little place where you go and, when there's a part of the park or someplace like that where you can sit and think and, but I do also like the idea of kind of the active trail being named for her because she was a really active person. I mean, she loved her grandkids and loved to go out and, do things with them and get on the trails with them. So, I mean, I think that there is some nice poetry to the trail aspect of this because that's it kind of speaks to who she was in some way, not more than necessarily anything else, but it's a good idea, and it's fairly easy to do, and it doesn't take a lot of discussion, and it wouldn't, as you said, she probably would not want us up here belaboring all this, and she would be mortified right now if we were doing it, but she can't stop us now. It's all up to us. So, I like the idea of the trail. I mean, I think it's simple. I think, as you point out, Mark, it really is kind of it's Maitland's own designation of the trail. It's not going to appear on, state maps or anything like that. It really is just kind of what we know it to be. And it's got, a pretty bland name as it stands, which is East/West Trail. And I think every city in America probably has one of those. And it would be nice to actually have a name on that, I think, that speaks to, who Maitland is. And I think that's an applicable place to put her name. Anybody else have any thoughts about this?
Sorry. I keep coming back to the idea of naming something after Sharon, and I laugh because we had so many conversations about the park naming policy, and she would be absolutely horrified to think that we'd be actually using the park naming policy to name anything after her. So, it's actually really funny, I think. So, to honor her memory, I think we should absolutely not name a park anything in the park policy after her. That would probably that would be awful. So, I think the best thing to do is to listen to the guidance. I think Lori is really kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Sharon would not want us to go out of our way to spend money on this or to make it a protracted conversation. And hearing from Mark and having these conversations that city staff really had a lot of input, and they think the trail in some way is where they're gravitating towards. The city staff are the people who are her co-workers on a daily basis, and us here on council, we are privileged to have been able to work with her, but we have our own day jobs as well. So I want to listen to staff because they are the ones who most closely worked with her on a daily basis and have the best input on that. So I would honor their wishes, and if the staff is recommending that we go with the trail, then I would like to honor staff's recommendation. So those are my thoughts.
I think that's well said. I would agree with that.
So let me ask the clarification. This is not going to appear on any map.
Well, I guess our maps, right? I mean, if we wanted to, but it wouldn't, I guess, appear like.
But Mark just said it wouldn't appear on our maps because we don't go to that detail on our maps.
Okay, so QR code is the only way. I mean, we would have signage, right? So individual signage.
Saying the Sharon and Samo Trail.
Right. So I mean,
right.
Yeah.
In any way, we're
So
doing
just like orange,
right.
Orange Trail.
So it's an east-west trail for purposes on a map or whatever, but it's just we have a plaque up that says it's really not naming the trail. It's just putting in something there in her honor.
No, it's naming the trail.
But we just said it's not. I think, to your point, we're belaboring, but I really think, I can, it's funny, because I'm with you, and then you're like, she wouldn't want this, and then I'm like, well, we're gonna do it, and, so I feel like a plaque or something there that says,
Right.
that it's, and even if we want to have it as a plaque that calls it that trail, but it's sort of
Informal.
an informal naming of that from,
Yeah, Mark, what does that look like? I mean, if we would be like a signpost that says the Sharon and Selma Trail on either end?
Yeah,
or-
it'd be where people would see it, where they enter and leave the trail, the main spots.
Would we have any signage within the city that points towards it, that it calls it specifically the Sharon and Selma Trail? Okay.
could you dedicate the trail? I mean, could it be some, I think, to your point, I think naming the trail is sort of defeating, it's,
Right.
I don't know, that's just my thought. I would stop short of the naming of, like you said, a park or a feature. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I would agree.
So then it becomes signage and informal designation?
That would be my thought.
Okay. All right. All right.
Mike, made that motion, however you want to call that? However you want to put that together?
Yeah.
Sure. So I make a motion to, I don't know if it's direct staff, is that what you authorized, that, what do you want, Mark?
Yeah, I think that the way I envisioned this, you would give direction to us,
Okay.
and then we would put that in the form of a resolution to memorialize it and bring that
Okay.
back to your consent
Okay,
agenda.
so I would make a motion to direct staff to prepare a resolution to dedicate, memorialize the trail in Sharon's honor, memory, with some form of signage, QR code, whatever they deem appropriate. I think that's all I need to say.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second that.
A second and a third, it sounded like, but
Yeah, yeah.
Laura, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wartzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Bounds.
Aye. Okay. That's great. We're on to the discussion item, which is Parks and Rec Advisory Board presentation.
Oh, we still have,
We had two items which.
Oh, right. We pulled two items. Okay, so those items have been moved to new decisions, item 2 and 3. First is the resolution regarding the rules of procedure for city council meetings.
Would you like me to make a full presentation or just questions on this?
Well, let's start with the reason why it was pulled, and then you can.
Well, I had a couple reasons. One, I had some questions about it inside that I've marked and I'm happy to go through, but the other thing is, these are changes that have to do with the council that, I just wanted to bring it up that, 4 of the 5 of us didn't get any, input into it, and it was on the consent agenda. I would just like to say, going forward in the future, anything that pertains to the council, maybe we can do a workshop on it, and get input from everybody.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't certainly, I worked with Lori to kind of come up with revisions to the rules, and mostly it was cleanup, really, so it was, I don't think
We didn't change or add any rules.
add any new rules or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
really just kind of make it.
Right.
currently.
These look pretty basic. I hear you. If
Yeah.
there's anything substantive, but I didn't see anything here that was more than.
Oh,
just-
I had a couple questions, so,
Yeah, and it's certainly, these are our rules, so everybody should have a shot at them, so I'm happy to do that, and we're going to do that now. Do you want to go through, or do you?
yeah, we can go through and then, look at it. The first one is, I gotta say, I love that we put this in. I don't know if this is in the last one is, I just wanted to say that real quick, is that I love it, that courtesy of the citizens to follow council members. Cell phones are to be silenced and no texting or emailing shall occur during a council meeting or council workshops. That was beautiful.
It was in your former one.
Was it in the
However,
former
it was
one?
buried in a very odd spot, so part of the cleanup that myself, Mayor Lowndes, and city manager Regenstein did was formulated an order that we kind of followed.
Yeah.
Good.
And made it mirror our current practice.
Well, that one's beautiful, I love it. So I was looking at next page, page 3 of 7, standing rules. It says, all of it says, the mayor, the mayor, the mayor, the mayor. So if the mayor's not here and you have the vice mayor, or if the mayor and vice mayor isn't here and you have a council member take it over,
If you go to
should it be changed to something of the mayor slash chairperson, or?
Well, if you go to page 6 where it says it, or presiding officer.
Right.
It finds it out who that would be. It would get quite lengthy
It has something about that too.
if I added that in every spot, but however you would like it changed.
Yeah, so I did. I went to presiding, and I still came up with what if, I mean, and on that one, it kind of came to what order do we do if the mayor and vice mayor isn't here? How do we know who takes the chair?
I call it a,
She used to wear the.
Do you call it?
She calls a meeting, and then the remaining members who are here then
vote
designate
for a chair for that.
chair one, so.
Okay, so I guess that was, you know, the cleanup I was looking at. Maybe does there need to be any clarification of that, or do y'all feel pretty good with that?
Well, I think typically what you do is, so you set out the rules where, and as you say, it's the mayor who does this, this, and this for running the meeting, and that's, I think, in rules that I've seen, is very common. And then when you have further down in the rules, you say, in the event that the mayor's not there, then you have the vice mayor who stands up. And it's kind of, our charter does the same thing. The vice mayor is the person who is the presiding officer at the meetings, and in the absence of those two, then it falls to the clerk to call the meeting.
Oh, yeah, I
If
see
you
it
didn't
right
have
there.
a mayor or
Okay.
vice mayor, nobody would be able to call a meeting to order. She calls it.
Okay,
And then
yeah, I
they,
saw it.
yeah.
Okay, thanks for the clarity.
But
So
if
just,
you want me to make a note in here that says, you know, to see under presiding officer, if I just spell all that out on each one of these, it just gets really lengthy.
yeah, I think that would be good. You just put a little asterisk there,
That just see.
at 1 or whatever, asterisk 1, to see, yeah, note to
I think
see
she's
that.
saying, I think she's saying every time, I think we're beating this one up.
Okay,
Yeah, I think she's saying that if she were to do it everywhere, that that's appropriate.
Or how about if I just move presiding officer to above standing rules? Or does that lend clarification?
Yes.
If I put it closer to standing rules?
Honestly, I don't think it matters, because the only reason anyone uses these is as reference, and so you look for what you're looking for, and it's in there.
I mean, so.
But
So-
it equally doesn't matter if you move it, so.
so I know I'm sitting here with 5 lawyers, so.
Well, no, it's honestly,
I'm doing this every day,
did
so I
it,
have
and
these
my
questions.
complaint to Mark was just that when I had them side by side, I didn't have Cliff Notes. I like my, as all lawyers do, our red line version. But I know that organization of the document was part of what you were changing, which then makes it difficult to do a red line. So but I say that to say, because I did go line by line and write like painstaking notes to ensure that we were not taking away any rights or adding rights other than the ones that were highlighted on the agenda, which the only one I found that was not highlighted there was that there's a part in the time of speaking allotted to a person, which we had changed from 5 to 3, which is my understanding what we had been doing as a point of practice for a long time anyway, where it said, it had a distinguishing thing about a group, how many speakers from a group, and that was deleted, and it seems to make sense to delete it, because I had a lot of questions about what a group was, and all of that, and so it seemed to make sense to take that out, which was just taken out. I didn't see anything else personally, because rules of procedure are kind of the thing I care most about on this planet, pretty much, so.
Well, that was mine too. And so when I asked for these, when I joined the city of Maitland, and then I came to a couple council meetings, and I said, well, we're not. So it was just to, if we had a new council member, this is something that gives someone a starting off point to know what to expect coming to.
Oh, and it's very important, if you ever want to enforce them, to be able to say that you have them in writing objectively. Also, it was a nice refresher for me, because tonight I knew exactly how we were supposed to do it. Because it made me actually read them and process them, so.
And I guess my last question is, sometimes we move items as in a public hearing or a decision item and say, especially when it's a decision item or a public hearing, when there's a big roof out here and we move it from number, 4 to number 1, do we need to make any reference to that in here, or is that fine just the way it is?
Well, that's always at council's discretion to do that. I did put kind of a notation that says shall be meeting specific, because like tonight, if you look at your agenda, there's no reference to a public hearing, there's no reference to certain things that if it's not meeting specific, it's not going to be on there. But then you, as a whole, collectively, you may or may say he was approached by so-and-so at the beginning, if we can move this to first, last, you collectively, if I'm not mistaken, get to decide that.
Right, but I mean, we don't have to have any verbiage in here to, that wasn't a question.
That would, I would defer to Mr. Shepherd on.
Okay. Those were my questions on it. So.
Just one more point of clarification, that just to make you aware of it, in this document, it does refer to speaker cards. We have not been using speaker cards for the last 2 years. Prior to that, we used them sort of hit and miss as a sort of an experiment that didn't work out so well, because with someone doesn't know they're coming to speak, they'll fill, if someone knows they're coming to speak, they'll fill out a speaker card, provide it to the clerk, so it'll provide a little more order for the mayor to call people up. But then in the passion of the moment, sometimes people decide they want to speak and don't have a speaker card, and someone has to track them down, get the speaker card filled out to make sure we have the correct information. So one way or the other, right now the speaker cards are in here, we would have to re-implement that. If that's the wish of the city council. If not, we would just do it like we have been doing, which is just like people come up, state their name for the record, name and address for the record, and move on from there.
If we're in agreement about not doing that in practice, my preference would be that the rules match what we do in practice, because I think you get into an issue with like arbitrary enforcement of things. But I don't have a preference other how we do it.
I think you're right. Yeah, either we have to follow it or don't. And I think at one point we did. I mean, I've been at this some time, and I know that it has never been the practice for us to do this. I think a couple of times it has come to different councils to say, well, it's a good idea to do this. In bigger places, Orange County, for instance, they do that. When you come in the door, there's a card there, you sign up, you get ready to go. I mean, mainly because people don't come all the way down there without the intent of doing something. They know what they're going to do. Sometimes people, in a smaller environment like this, may just come in when the Spirit moves them, and the Spirit moved Ms. Wimberly earlier, I think, to speak about one of the issues that she would have had to fill out a card at that point, rather than just coming up. I don't know where we would fill that out. It can be done, and it certainly makes Lori's job easier because she gets names and addresses that way, and for the minutes, it makes certain processing easier. I can promise to do better by getting people's names and asking for spellings, perhaps, if that makes it easier.
We can also add a little neon cheat sheet over there when someone steps up there that says, please don't forget to do that.
Right. In lieu of the speaker cards, yeah. So yes, I would be in favor of striking the speaker card item. I know that was the last time the council vote was taken. We put this in, and then we just didn't follow it. So how do you all feel about it?
The only thing that I think the speaker card brings is some organization, because, and we've all seen it here. It's like, okay, if you want to speak, please line up, and then there's a line doing an L shape all the way halfway, across. I have a picture of it from back in the day, but I think it's kind of nice because people can just sit there and go, and you just call them up as it goes. And I'm not saying, just somehow if we could control that and not have big lines, I don't know how we would control it. Anybody has any ideas? But I see that.
I was reminiscing with Mark about planning and zoning meetings today, and we used to have a lot of people, and I did, when I was the chairman, I used the speaker cards because it was, they'll remember, there would be 50, 60 people that would want to speak on certain items, and I would take the cards and I'd read 3 names off at a time, and then when the line got through those 3, call up another. So it does have a useful, I would personally recommend that I also think we're probably spending way too much time on this, because as everyone said, we don't really use very often, so. But I would leave it.
No, I think it becomes nice because then Lori has the names written out and the addresses and everything already. Try to jot it down.
And it doesn't preclude somebody, we didn't, if you didn't have a card in it, you couldn't not speak, you would just, after you spoke, you would fill out the card.
But then it seems to defeat, I'm sorry. I'm bad at my rules.
I don't think it defeats the purpose, because it gives whoever was the person, I mean, Dan would remember, we did this, I did this with Dan, we would, then it had the person's name and address clearly written. It does serve a purpose even post, and it also, again, if you've got a meeting with 40 people who want to talk, if you can get through 40 people in an organized fashion, if you have a couple people at the end who want to speak, who then have to fill out a card, I think it still serves the purpose to have a card.
Mike, I'm sorry.
That's my opinion. That's just my opinion.
I was with you on planning and zoning back in those days, and yeah, I remember that's how you would do it. You call up 3 people at a time and have them lined up. So
I'm in favor of strengthening it, not because I think it has no purpose, but I think that, like I said before, we need to follow to the T whatever we have in there, especially now we know better, we'll do better. And I think that to Mr. Wild's point, like if we allow you to speak after you don't turn one in, then that's what the rule would need to reflect, that we allow you still to speak after. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to make those exceptions, whatever the exceptions are, that's the thing that I care most about, is that the rules are truly reflecting whatever policy we're putting into place. I think that either way, there would be exceptions that we would wish the rule was different. But from my experience so far, I think that the long lines are more of an exception than they are a rule. I've never witnessed them to be unruly. I know that there's been times that I've not been here, but I think that it serves more to take away right from people and ability to comment than the other way around, and that's fine.
Okay, as it stands, the rule says all speakers must complete a card and give it to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. I think that would need to be changed. I mean, for instance, you know, maybe it could be, if we're going to leave it in, or I prefer to take it out, but if we're going to leave it in, I think we need to modify that to some degree to say it can be done afterwards or during as well.
What if we said that, could we, I just want to get, I'll be honest, this seems like what if we said, this is under the speaker's regular meeting procedures that we're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we say, upon the discretion of the mayor, well, again, down below, the mayor is considered the presiding officer, and it could be that, so, at the election of the mayor, speakers must complete and submit a speaker card to the city clerk, period, not prior to, and just leave it at that.
Anytime you leave something to the discretion of the mayor, you leave open questions regarding why the mayor is using that discretion in certain circumstances and not enough.
Well, they better use that discretion wisely.
Clearly, the infinite wisdom.
I have complete faith in how the mayor use that discretion.
The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, well, if this is our last item on here, and Lindsay, do you have, or everybody, do you have?
I have no thoughts.
Okay, just want to make sure. Somebody can make a motion, either modifying or striking or leaving it as is, and we'll have rules.
Is there a question?
What if we make a motion to amend the speaker card to say, it's hard on the spot, but that someone must fill one out before they leave after speaking? Does that make sense? So that everyone would have to do one, but it's not discretionary, but they just have to do it before they leave.
Yeah, you said prior to the start of the meeting, if possible. or
How are you
something.
going to capture that person when they run out the door? I mean,
Big choices to do.
I think, Lord, yeah.
They're stricken from the record.
I mean, I'm to the point of, it's making.
Right, actually, so, but this was an item, yeah, we do want to go to public on this. was a consent agenda item that would have gone to the public. So any public comments on this?
One question.
No questions, comments?
I'll rephrase it. Is there any provision, well, let me take the question mark out.
Name, we need to.
Dale, no, wait, can't. Have we provided a provision for someone giving their minutes to someone else? Is that in here? And you know we've run into it more than 2 or 3 times. I handled it differently than John, you may have, or Howard may have, or Superstar, Doug may have. So, sharing minutes, passing them along. I was not a fan of that. That wasn't a question. I was just.
No, it's a question. We'll answer it as we get to it. That's good. Thank you, Dale. Anybody else? This is a fascinating topic. You know, you guys, come on. All right. We'll close the public hearing. I see what you mean, Dale, whether or not somebody can use 2 of their minutes and give the 1/3 to somebody else.
Or all of them.
There's none, everybody gets 3 minutes and no minute swapping, and it isn't addressed one way or the other here. So I don't think
That was my view.
yeah.
So I want to find a ground of glory here. So, what would you feel best? I mean, I think having some ability for someone to do it is worth it. But if you think it's better to say we'll do it at some point, then I'm good with that. But if you're saying you want to strike it, then I'm probably not good with
I'm
that.
not going to dig my heels on anything other than like something that leaves discretion and kind of willy-nilly.
So strike. So you're good with if we just struck the prior to the meeting, prior to the start of the meeting. So what's your problem? What would be the difficulty with that?
Well, the premise of having them kind of prior is that then I can hand them to the mayor or whoever the presiding officer is at that meeting, and they can call them up. If they're bringing them up in the middle and we have other items going on in the meeting, I mean, trying to make less of the premise, my thought behind the speaker cards where you guys were trying to instill a little bit more decorum and order, but if people are doing cards before, after, during, running outside and coming back in because they forgot, I mean, that's not really, I don't think accomplishing what you want.
I mean, full
So,
disclosure.
in my practice, look, in my practice, it doesn't matter. We all have, like I said, we all have our own.
You're going to tackle them.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Dan didn't have to tackle anybody, and it ran pretty efficiently. But I don't. If you see that as a major hurdle, then that's fine too. But it ran. It helped. I can tell you when you had 50 people lined up and you could call 3 at a time, it helped.
Yeah.
But if y'all don't like it, I don't care. I mean, we haven't had that lately, so.
What about if it's for a crowd of more,
You would still do 3, you'd have the cards and you just call 3 at a time.
No, I mean, I guess what I was meaning is, would you like to reserve it in your rules to be at a time when it's an item that's going to have?
Where we have.
Oh, okay.
I assume we have the
Yeah, when
publishing
there's-
though, so that.
How would you do that?
In my, full disclosure, and Mark kind of intimated this as an experience or some sort of anecdotal thing that we had not discussed. You hinted at this. I, in my practice, my professional, outside of this council practice, have people call me about constitutional rights claims all the time. And one of the common things is going to an Orange County board of some type and feeling that that process was used in some way to limit their ability to address the board. I'm not saying that this council would ever do that, but that is where I'm coming from on that, and so that's why. And because I've sat in here, again, way less than everybody else, but I've sat in here, never seen it used, and everything seems fine. So those things combined is why I'm saying that, because I get concerned about anything that ever can be used in that way, especially if we don't need it. But if y'all think, I mean, you're most affected by it in a lot of ways, Lori, and Mayor Long. So in terms of whether or not we're harmed by not having it at this point, but that is why I raised that.
Right. And you know what, I hear what you're saying, and I've gone to other meetings where they do this, and it's never been problematic. I mean, it runs pretty smooth. I think you could put some verbiage in there that says, nobody will be denied a speaking opportunity. Please, we could have the cards out in the foyer, or, please just sign a card and get it. I mean, and if it's somebody who didn't get a card and they want to speak, we can capture it up here. But the cards, I think, are a good way of going. So I would go with the cards. I think
This is silly to have a vote on this one. What do you think, John? I'm trying to find a middle ground so we can move this forward, so give me a...
Well, I understand Laura's issue with that, and I certainly don't want to be accused of taking away anybody's speaking rights. But it's a pretty hard rule. It says all speakers must complete a card handed in prior to the start of the meeting, full stop. So, I think we can soften that by just saying prior to the start of the meeting, comma, if possible. And then that, although you haven't really baked in discretion by using the word, it does leave some discretion in me, but also with the council, because we would say, listen, she came 5 minutes late, she didn't have a chance to get this thing done prior to the start of the meeting, she's handing her card in right now, she can speak, certainly. So, I think just those 2 words adding on, if possible, I think.
You good with that?
Yeah. Because otherwise, I would be against any rule that says nobody can speak unless they were here prior to the start of the meeting.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
So strike, so I think the options are get rid of prior to the start of the meeting or add if possible.
Yeah, I think there's 2.
Lori,
Sorry, what does it currently say?
it says prior to, so it's on page
2.
Right here, 2.
Yeah, 2 of the rules, all speakers prior to the start of the meeting. So either we just say that they're going to fill out a card.
I mean, I think if possible, I think a lot of times the circumstances that pop up is when there's a huge line and they say no, or whatever. So that's
If possible?
sure.
Okay. We good otherwise? I'll make a motion make a motion to approve the resolution adopting rules of procedure of Maitland City Council meetings with the addition of the words if possible on page 2 in the paragraph labeled speakers.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion in a second. Lauren, roll call.
Councilmember Wurzel,
I
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Mayor Maitland.
Aye. Okay, let's go to the second of the 2 consent agenda items that were pulled. This is the ranking of the library RFQ. And Councilmember Guthrie, since you were the one pulled, do you want to?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted, maybe, Mark talked to me today and gave me, the 411 on this, as they would say. But I thought it would just be a good opportunity to kind of talk to the citizens and the public out here, let them know, how this is going to go in order. Like if you read it on our agenda, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it sounds like public input is the last thing to come, but really every single one of those is going to have public input. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind, really what I wanted you to do is just describe what's going on with this, and then maybe we could open it up, and if anybody has any questions or wants to talk on it.
So, okay, yeah, let's just treat it like a decision item.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark, if you can introduce the
Yeah.
item.
Sure.
Or do you have a clarifying Mark first?
My thought is that, and I hear you, Vance, I don't know that that's actually, I feel like we're putting Mark on the spot on this one to go through that, because that's probably not what he was intending to do, was sort of give because I think we're getting into, this was just a request.
Well, I think it's just a quick, we're choosing between these 3 people that's been vetted through, the library, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then we open it up real quick, let's see if somebody wants it.
So I don't want to get into a library discussion, that's my point. This is,
Okay.
I think this is a ranking of the professional for architectural services. I don't think it's a library discussion. I think if we're going to get into a library discussion, we're going to go well beyond what I'm prepared to talk about tonight, because I don't have enough information to go on
To the
That's
degree that
fine.
it's helpful, when I reviewed this item and spoke to Mark, I asked if it was something he was going to address the status of this at both Fort Maitland Park, actually, which we did not pull off consent to the public, because I thought those were items that the public is constantly asking about the status of. And he informed me that he was already, he was intending to address those at that time, but I wasn't thinking public discussion needed to be a part of it as well.
Yeah, Mark, you're up.
Just real briefly then, back in 2017, we began to embark on a serious discussion on the library and what to do with it and how to improve the facility, or if a new facility would better serve the residents of Maitland. So in 2018, most people remember this, we did the facility assessment. Based upon that evaluation, the City Council determined that upgrading and renovating the facility was really not an option. So at the City Council's request in 2020, a comparative site evaluation process was done, looking at 3 sites: the existing library site, the Quinstrong Park site, and the north lot, north of Horatio. What determination was is that the Quinstrong Park site was best suited for a library based upon a number of reasons I'll be happy to go into, because I think I recall most of those. If not, I have my files here. So in January of 2002, we did some polling that showed that there was support for a new library. So based upon that, we put out the RFQ to talk about the next step. Actually, prior to that, we talked about what the next steps would be in order to move the library project forward. Those would be the 5 items that Councilmember Guthrie was just talking about: doing the space planning, determine the current and future needs of a library based upon various things: collection size, programming, patron space, things like that. Do some preliminary design work, layout, architectural renderings, and site plan, because the park design would also be included in this, because Quinstrong Park is in need of probably a little bit of love and some upgrading, especially if we're going to put a new library there. So park design was going to be involved with that. It was key to address the adaptive reuse of the existing library with an emphasis on retaining the original structure and public engagement. And so as we talked about, as Councilmember Guthrie and I talked about, this was sort of laid out in an order, but it's not an order. There's public engagement that takes place through the entire library design process. So we need to get public input along the way, so when we would get to the end, we would have a good idea of where we're going with this, how much it's going to cost, what it would look like. So the public, City Council, everyone knows what they're getting into. We did receive, on November 18th, we received statements of qualifications to our RFQ to address these. The selection committee consisted of me, our Public Works Director, Community Development Director, Parks and Rec Director, the Director of the Maitland Public Library, and the Director of the Art and History Museums to evaluate the proposals that came in. The selection committee ranked those almost unanimously in the order you see here. 4 of the 5 members ranked HBM number 1 with Borelli number 2. One of the members ranked Borelli number 1 with HBM number 2, with the third firm ranking 3rd on all of our scorecards. So what you're doing tonight is affirming the ranking. I can go into the details if you'd like about why we ranked HBM number 1. So what you're doing tonight is affirming the ranking. What we would then do is engage the top-ranked firm in contract negotiations. So we would put together a scope of services, talk to them about what their process is. HBM is an architectural firm that's been around for 40 years. All they do is libraries, exclusively. So they've been through this before. So we would tell them what our expectations are as far as what our scope is, and they would apply their knowledge to provide us a scope of service and contract that would meet our needs based upon their experience. That contract would come forward to you for approval. It would probably be a couple months before that happens, and then we would move forward with the first phases of that initial phase of library discussions.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any questions of Mark on that? No? Anybody from the public wish to comment on the library rankings? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And further discussion or motion would be in order. You good?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Move to approve the rankings of firms as recommended by the selection committee and authorize the interim city manager to negotiate a contract for professional planning and architectural design services for the Maitland Library project.
Second.
Motion and a second. Great. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Worcel. Aye. Mayor Latvins.
Aye. All right, that concludes the decisions and consent agenda. And now we have a discussion item regarding the Parks and Recs board's presentation to us regarding splash pad facility. Jay, are you?
Yeah, I'm just going to give a real brief introduction. Just wanted to give you a little bit of context of what this discussion item is regarding this evening. Part of the Constitution of Park and Recreation Advisory Board is to review the 5-year CIP each year before it's presented to council. So we began those discussions on what type of capital projects would be included in this particular year's 5-year CIP. At that time, PRAD identified that they wanted to have an additional item that would be looked at in that 5-year CIP. Many different points of discussion were brought up as to the possibility of implementing a splash pad and what that would look like. In the January 4th meeting, actually, PRAD voted unanimously to forward a recommendation to council that included a feasibility study to look into several items regarding a splash pad in Maitland. Tonight, what's traditional is that when there is a recommendation to council, that the chair of the board come and give a presentation to council regarding that recommendation. Tonight with us is Jeremy Good, who is the PRAD chair. He's going to go through a little bit of detail regarding the splash pad recommendation and what is entailed as far as the feasibility study.
All right, thank you, Jay. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to council tonight about the recommendation that we brought forth about a feasibility study for potential incorporation of a splash pad somewhere in the city of Maitland. And so what I'm going to run through is a pretty brief presentation just covering some of the background that led PRAB towards this recommendation and why we feel this is something that the residents of the city would like to see us pursue, and why we think a feasibility study is in order. So generally this presentation is going to cover 4 things. We're going to share a little bit of research that feeds this. We're going to look at the identification of a potential location. That's part of what the feasibility study would be for. We'll talk a little bit about the projects we have completed and then the goals of the study. So as many of you know, the Parks and Recreation has a 10-year master plan. It runs 2017 through 2027. We're about halfway through that plan at this point, and I think we've made really good progress. The city's done an excellent job in completing a lot of the initiatives that residents were demanding that we do. So in diving into what's led us to splash pad feasibility recommendation, some of the data that was collected that fed that Parks and Recreation 10-year master plan it is really what's leading us to explore a splash pad in the city of Maitland. And so in looking at some of the data behind that, the largest unmet need is a splash pad in that survey that was sent out to Maitland residents. This went out to every 4th household in the city. That's when that what feedback was collected, and that's what, again, fed that master plan. The next item is, it was ranked number 4 as most important facility to add amongst the different facilities that Parks and Rec oversees. And so, some of the other ones we've made good progress on, pathways being, the number 1 thing. So the expansion of the bike trails has been a big part of that. And in surveying households with children, parents ranked splash pads second behind pathways and trails as something that they would like to see the City of Maitland pursue. So in looking at this data, it's really led us to why we want to pursue at least looking at a splash pad. The only other thing to bring up here is they did also indicate that this is the item that they would most like to see the city fund. Parents indicated a splash pad was something that they'd be behind the city funding. So some of our neighboring municipalities have splash pads already, as many of you may know, and we just wanted to bring this to council's attention. Altamont Springs has a splash pad. Winter Park has community pools. Oviedo has a water park and a pool. Dr. Phillips has a splash pad. Pop has a splash pad, and Winter Garden has a splash pad. And I have some photos at the end just to show you some examples of what those look like. So in talking about some of the things that PRAB has completed over the course of the first part of that master plan, this is a list. I won't read through all of them, but you'll see, a lot of the trail initiatives are part of this list. Expansion of the trails, and then some of the ongoing projects now are maintenance items in the parks. Lake Sibelia Beach is about to kick off the project there and refurbing that park. And then we're also working towards the potential for some consistent park signage as an initiative that we're taking on. So in looking at the feasibility recommendation for council, the goals of the feasibility study, I think that PRAB, as we started to discuss this amongst ourselves, there were a lot of ideas about what it would cost, what ongoing operational costs would be, what the best location would be, and we realized that we really didn't have a great handle on those things, and we really didn't also have a great handle on what the potential risks are in putting in a splash pad for the city, and so that's what led us to looking at a feasibility study as a way forward to see if it's even something that we want to pursue as a city, putting in a splash pad. And so the goals of this would be to identify a suitable location, construction costs, ongoing operational costs, and then look at some case studies from other cities to see what have been their experiences with splash pads. What risks have they run into? Have they experienced anything in terms of liabilities or upkeep, or just things that we would want to know going into this type of a project as a city. So this is the Winter Garden splash pad. It's a photo of the splash pad that's right near the downtown area there. This is, I believe, the Sanford splash pad. And then this is the Altamont Springs splash pad. And so, we're happy to answer any questions that council may have about this, but we did want to bring this as a recommendation for next year's fiscal budget to pursue this, because we do think that there is resident demand, and it's something that would serve the city well for us to at least explore the potential for a splash pad somewhere in our city.
Thank you, Mr. Good. And let me say thank you also for all your work on this. I know that this is we all get paid tons of money to be up here on Monday night, and certainly those guys all back there are paid to be here, but you do it for the love of the thing, and we really appreciate all your efforts in this, and joining an advisory board and putting in time and effort on this. We really do appreciate it, and obviously you put a lot of thought into this, and you guys have done a lot of homework on this, and your ideas are certainly taken with the best interest of Maitland in mind. My question is, in my materials, I didn't really see, I liked your slide, it was a couple slides before, what you wanted to see out of the feasibility study, and, yeah, there we go.
This one?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of helps us to, I think, helps me to place what you're asking, what you like, what the feasibility study would look like, what questions it's trying to answer. But again, I appreciate you doing all this and coming out here tonight and helping us work through this. Does anybody have any questions of Mr.
Yeah. So, did you all already do like reach out and do like a cost analysis of the feasibility study to what it would run?
We have not done a cost analysis. We did, I will say, have some ballpark ideas that we were going to include in the letter that went to council, but we realized that we hadn't really done enough digging on that to put a number to this. I don't think it would be extremely expensive to do a feasibility study on a splash pad in the city, but I say that not being a splash pad feasibility expert. So,
right.
So no, we don't have a number in mind at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be a good number 5 on there to, well, that would be the feasibility study, but if, you know, we could figure out what the cost would be, that would be great information to have also. So, did you reach out to the other cities that you had on there and ask where their splash pads were located? Were they in parks? Were they in the downtown area close to retail and restaurants and shops? Where did they generally put their splash pads?
Yeah, so some of that is known just based on the locations of, you know, where they are. Like, for example, Winter Garden
Well, I don't have
splash pad.
children, so I'm easy to tell me.
And then one of the members of PREP did reach out for example, to Altamont Springs about their splash pad. The feedback he got, and this is, you know, anecdotal, is they're very happy with their splash pad. It was, I will say, more expensive to build than I anticipated. It was about $525,000 to build that splash pad. And then I believe the number was, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, about $50,000 a year for upkeep and maintenance. So there's been debate over where a splash pad would go in the city. I will say that I am a proponent of putting it near businesses. So I think the downtown corridor would be the ideal location for a splash pad. That's just my opinion. You know, I would like to see people come and visit a splash pad and then feed the retail and restaurant establishments that are close to it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah. Oh, well, my question was, where did the other cities have it? Mm-hmm. Did they have it just in parks, or like places where you're saying where it's more of a magnet for a generator for the retail? Yeah,
it's a real mix. So, you know, Sanford it's relatively close to downtown. Like I said, Winter Garden is right off of Plant Street there downtown. But then some of the other municipalities, like I know Dr. Phillips, I went by their splash pad. Theirs is kind of tucked way out behind a neighborhood in a big park there. So it really, there's a big mix of where cities choose to locate those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so have you all thought, has there been any thought about, or was there any discussion of, you know, since it has a good price tag, was there any discussion of, you know, suggestion of using ARPA money for it, or out of what we have? Or where did y'all think, or where were y'all looking to generate the revenue for this, or where do you want to see the money come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is really exploring whether or not this makes sense for the city. And so there was, I will say that the discussion amongst PRAB initially was, let's bring a recommendation to do a splash pad. And I think we pretty quickly realized that we didn't have enough data to support that recommendation, which is why we landed on this being a start. Where the money will come from ultimately, I think it would be great to explore if there are grants or other potential ways to bring money in that would help cover those costs. But we haven't really gone fully down that path at this point.
Great. Thank you, sir. Yeah, and I agree with John. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Does anybody else have any questions, for Mr. Good? No questions or comments? Well, thank you, Mr. Good. Thank you for, and thank you to PRAB for sending you up here to do the work. Honestly, it is, I'm really glad that you all are doing it. You're spending your time and making Maitland a better place to live. That's a great thing. So let's bring it back up here for discussion. Thank you. Bring it up here for discussion. Any further discussion on? I mean, it seems to me this is it's a sound recommendation, and it's going to come around in budget time. You know, is what we want to do and how we want to spend money, and how we want to build the CIP budget for parks. And that discussion typically happens over the summer when we get together and do the budget. Mark and his team put the budget together, but it'll come back to us. I think, Mark, if you can bring it back to us, keep this high on our radar as we go through that, so we know what PRAB's recommendation is, and we start prioritizing how we're going to spend everybody's money. And I think there are some people who came to speak tonight to this issue, and with the indulgence of the council, speak. Is that all right?
I think with the knowledge that, I'm with you, John, that this really, that part of this will come up later.
Right. It'll be, prioritization of what we're spending our money on is really kind of a months-long deal, and you know, this will be another education point for us that we go forward. So, and everything, it's all relative. I mean, everybody, there are constituents for different items and ways to spend money, and there are, every one of them is legitimate. It's just a matter of how we're going to end up spending money.
And this wasn't framed as a decision, so there's going to be no vote as to anything on this. It's just a discussion. So
That's right.
Just setting the stage.
That's good. Thank you for doing that. I think that's with that in mind. We can open up the public period. Anybody who have please come up, say your name. If you haven't filled out a speaker card already, it's too bad.
I thought we had a minute. My name is Sam Birnbaum. I live at 2315 Mohawk Trail.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council members, and Maitland residents for the chance to speak tonight. As discussed earlier, 6 years ago, there was a survey conducted on what Maitland residents want to see the PRAB spend their money on. So the answers include towards the top of the list things like splash pads, and toward the bottom, pickleball courts. It's sensible that we would have a feasibility study directly after this survey conducted, but I would not say it's sensible that we would have the feasibility study 6 years later. This data regarding residents' demand seems to be outdated. Not only is the feasibility study that we discussed tonight infeasible, as the average cost of feasibility studies range from $15,000 to tens of thousands of dollars, but much of the data precipitating it is outdated, as I said. For example, 3 million Americans in 2017 played pickleball. Today, between 2021 and 2022, 36 million Americans play pickleball. Now, yes, this survey was to account for increases in popularity of the activities listed and the request by every fourth home, but it definitely could not account for a 10 times increase in one sport. My friends and I's experience with pickleball has been amazing. Every Friday night, we go down to Katy Park and play against people of all different ages. There's a large demographic of the community there. One match might be against our local UCF students, or 13-year-olds, and the next against 2 8-year-olds and women. That's something really special, and it's not something that we have right now in Maitland. It's something that we see in Winter Park, and that's the closest place I can go. It's 20 minutes away. Every time we go, every Friday night, what are we doing before pickleball? We're going out to eat, we're going out to shop, and this economic stimulation is something that comes from things like pickleball, and I don't think it will come the same from splash pads. We can try to put something in a plaza or in a city center, but it won't stimulate the economy or Independence Lane, the same things that events do, like the farmers market or the pickleball courts would. For reference regarding cost, Winter Park, I talked to their Parks and Rec department, they retrofitted just 2 of their tennis courts for 6 well-lit pickleball courts for $60,000, which is a fraction of the price of the $500,000 we're looking to spend on a splash pad. Now, I know that we have makeshift pickleball courts at Minnehaha. These courts only operate Monday through Wednesday for 3.5 hours on all those days. That's 10.5 hours in the full week, which is not nearly enough time to really get that Parks and Rec engagement that we're looking for. One of my friend's parents asked me why I was coming to speak tonight, saying that my voice would not be a deciding factor. And I agree, it won't be. But I hope that my experience with pickleball will encourage you all to think further about how we need to spend the Park and Rec department budget. And I urge you to refrain from spending thousands of dollars on a feasibility study for a project that will only address a small demographic of Maitland residents. Thank you for my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burnwell. Anybody else like to speak this evening?
Hello everybody, my name is Coleman Price, I live at 900 Arapahoe Trail. So I live where my family has a long history in Maitland, going back to my great-grandmother Paula Hawkins. For a short while we lived in Winter Garden, and my little brother, who's 6 years old, would want to go to the splash pad a lot. And when we would go up there, we noticed that there was only like 2 other families that were there. So it's like there wasn't really like a lot of engagement that you would expect from a project that large. Meanwhile, as Sam was saying, when we go to the pickleball courts at the Katy Way, there's many different age groups, many different demographics, so many people. So if we put a pickleball court in place here, it could also bring in people from adjacent cities, as it does with the Winter Park courts. The benefits community growth, as Sam was talking about. Sorry, I'm fumbling here. And it'll help out, if we put it in Maitland Community Park, you can help out that little pavilion rentals and the shop inside and other services, and it could allow people to explore other opportunities such as tennis and basketball over there. So yeah, that's. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Professor. Anybody else have any comments this evening?
Sorry. I got distracted. Congratulating them from speaking. I'm still Elizabeth Cumberland, 2315 Mohawk Trail. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for letting me talk on this. And let me start off by saying I want to thank Mike Thomas, who is not here still tonight. He said he would be. Without his encouragement, I would be here tonight. He said he had never seen me at a city council meeting, so I said, well, I will show up. So I am showing up tonight on this issue because when I heard about it, I was shocked that you are going to be discussing spending money between what Jay Kahn told me on the phone, hi, thank you for your time the other day, was between $15,000 and tens of thousands of dollars on just a feasibility study. And as the young man just told you, it would only be $60,000. You could actually make a service available to, and amenity available to residents. So I thought that was an insane expense and thought that I should talk, and I implore you to be fiscally conservative, and I hope each of you are. Now, I believe that it is too expensive a project benefiting too limited number of residents. Expense. I've done half this feasibility study already. I have reached out to a number of neighboring cities. I can give you details, but I don't want to overstate my time. But the cost of splash pads ranges from $275,000 to $560,000. Operating costs between $10,000 and $50,000. Please note that you have to have an aquatic certified personnel to check that water every day that the splash pad is open. If it's not checked, you violate health code, and you know what happened in Arlington, Texas. We don't want that here. In 2023, according to multiple industry sites, we should expect to pay about $500,000 for a basic, small, municipal, and that's a commercial quality splash pad. You want to exchange the reach that it will attract. So we have a splash pad and a spray playground, a spray ground. The splash pad is 2 to 5 years. The spray ground is 5 to 12 years. If you want to do something for that age, you're looking at millions of dollars. And that's not money we have to spend. Let the City of Winter Park's experience serve as a cautionary example of what we can expect to experience here. If you've been to Winter Park, you've seen that they used to have a splash pad. It was built in the late 2000s. I took Sam there. They closed it about 5 years ago because it couldn't meet code. I've spoken with them extensively on the phone. It will cost more money to repair than to replace. Currently, they are doing neither. Audience, by their nature, splash pads serve a very young demographic, 2 to 5 years old. According to the most recent census data, only 4.1% of our city's population is under the age of 5. So who will use the splash pad? When I first heard about this, I talked to some former council members, not the former mayor, but former council members, and they told me that the former Sharon and Selma thought a splash pad would draw mostly non-residents, and that said visitors were unlikely to patronize our businesses after playing in our park. Well, I thought about that, and I get it. I took the kids to splash pads when they were younger, and we left, they were sticky, they were tired, they were wet. I'm not taking them to a nice restaurant like that. I'm taking them home for a nap. So in your deliberations, please ask yourselves, how does a splash pad benefit the city as a whole? I urge you as a stewards of our budget, again, to be fiscally conservative. I hope we all agree that before undertaking any large expenditure, to include this study and the splash pad, the council should first give people the opportunity to come together and talk about it. Moving forward with this, I certainly hope that with the construction of the splash pad simply does not give enough time for people to debate this issue if we do not open it up to public input. Thank you. Sorry to speak so quickly, but it's really hard to get in like 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wimberly. Anything else?
Just briefly, as a former civics teacher, thank you to our youngest speakers in particular, everybody, but in particular the youngest. I know it's not easy to do, and it does matter to say no, so thank you.
That's absolutely true. Yes, thank you. That is
I agree
absolutely
with
true.
that. It's nice to get young people come up and talk. It's great.
This is
Good for you all to do that.
a lesson in civics to everybody tonight. I hope we don't scare you all. It can be quite gratifying. And,
All about that.
yes, thank you all for showing up. And going forward, I think, as we said, this is going to be placed in the context of budget budget consideration as we go forward. And over the course of the months, we'll figure out where the proper place for this would be, if at all. But it's good information. I'm glad it's been corralled together. I think we have some good places to start anyway. And I would also say it's not necessarily an either-or situation, so perhaps there are ways we can find to make everybody happy. I think that's it on that. Mark, you have everything you need from us on that discussion, where we're going to end up with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Reports. Mr. City Attorney, I know you have some news for us.
I do, but before I get to the news, I'm going to give you an update per your request. On Senate Bill 170, which is a wolf in sheep clothing, the last time we met, I discussed with you the Testa case and how it would change what happens when we have second readings. If we have to continue the hearing, we have to also re-advertise it instead of the way we've always done it, and that cities all over the state have done it, which is to announce the continuance at that specific meeting to a specific date and time in the future, so that no re-advertising was necessary. Well, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Because shortly after I said that, what I thought was a friendly senator who actually had a brain and proposed an amendment that would change the law back to what it's always been and then codify it in a statute so that we could do what we've always done. And it states in that particular portion of the legislation that this is simply a codification of existing law. So it would basically slap the court that made the ruling and said, you've been wrong and you're still wrong and we're going to fix it. So that was the idea, and it looked really good. In fact, it went around our office and said, hey, there's somebody smart in Tallahassee, which is a rarity. We don't generally say that. Only today we found out it's tacked on to Senate Bill 170, and 170 is about a bill that you want to talk about. It's the bill in which if you propose legislation here, ordinance or whatnot, that some business or businesses think is adversely economically impacting them, they can file suit against you, and until it is resolved, you cannot go forward with that ordinance. And if they prevail, they can get their attorney's fees against you. And there's a whole long list of the things they can sue you for. And it's a prevailing plaintiff attorney's fee provision, not a prevailing party provision. So in the second part of my news today, which I'm going to share with you in a moment, you'll see why that matters. But so they've taken the good bill, the thing that fixes the problem, and stuck it on the bad bill. And today, all over the local government listserv, with all the nerdy attorneys get to discuss things that are going around the state, there was big discussion before people figured out what it was tacked on to. Oh, isn't this great? We're going to fix this, and it's going to be rapid, and good job to the League of Cities and so forth. but then we found out what it was tacked on to, and I was like, are you kidding me? So we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll get them split apart, but I don't have any confidence. Anyway, so that's that. I'll keep you posted, and we'll see where it goes. On the better news, today we had another, and what turned out to have been the final liability hearing on the Peacock Ford case, because we won summary judgment on all counts with prejudice, not summary judgment, dismissal with prejudice on all counts. So, and the court took under advisement, but sort of in my opinion with a wink and a nod that we're going to get it, that we will be entitled to attorney's fees. So there'll be a future hearing on the Burt Harris portion that they dismissed to determine fees. If that doesn't happen, I'll let you know. But either way, the case is going to be over unless they appeal it, which would be, and I'm being kind here, foolish. So that's where we are. It was an hour-long plus hearing, and I'm happy to report that it went the way I hoped it would. And sorry it took as long as it did, but we had 4 judges for one case, so had to educate each one separately. And that's where we are.
And congratulations, thanks for, it's good to know that that case is won in back. What happens now?
What happens now?
With fees going forward?
Yeah, what happens now is the court asked us to submit I'm preparing the order on the dismissal with prejudice. I'm preparing final judgment, and also preparing an order as if she granted entitlement to fees while she's considering it. After making that statement, opposing counsel said, well, if you're taking on an advisement, well, does that mean I'm supposed to submit an order too? Yeah, you can submit an order too. But you can kind of figure out where that's probably going to end up. Okay, so and so we will. In my experience, having done this for a very long time, when a judge takes something under advisement that's going to be bad for one side, they do it because they don't want to do it to their face, and so that's what happened. And so we'll get that. We'll submit the orders probably by the end of the week. We'll see what the court does with that specific one. But assuming that she says, yes, you're entitled, this is Judge Schreiber we're in front of now, that we will then go back for a fee hearing unless the other side decides that it might be smart to just figure out what the fees are and pay them, so we don't have to go through that process. Because we get fees for fighting about fees if they're going to fight about those too. And I promise you my rates are way better than this.
Okay, great. Well done. Great. Good news. Mark, anything from?
Yeah, a couple things real quick. Public Works Department's been really busy setting the stage for a couple projects that are coming down the line. The Domrick Hills sewer project, phases 2 through 4 is out to bid. We should be getting those back in a couple weeks, as is the school zone signage and striping. Remember, we talked about that quite a bit last year. That's out to bid now. It has to be done this year, so that's out, so we should be getting that pricing back also within the next couple weeks. Not to end there, on deck for going out to bid is engineering services. This is the year we have to put engineering services out to bid, so that's going to be going out. The boardwalks are also teed up to get ready to go in the next couple weeks to put those out to bid. And also our construction manager at risk RFQ is also going to go out, so we get another construction manager at risk on board to help us get some of these projects knocked out that are stacking up on us. So a lot of work on the front end going on out of Public Works. As we talked about, we approved the Fort Maitland final change order this evening. The way that's going to work, I had a conversation with our construction manager on that, CJ Rohde with Burkhardt Construction, just before the meeting. Looking at about 2 months to get things going, wrapped up, buttoned up at grand opening in Fort Maitland Park. So I know a lot of people ask you a lot of times about what's it going to happen, when's it going to open. That's the time frame he's working on. He has the subs queued up and ready to go. So there's always a caveat of barring any unforeseen circumstances, that's the time frame we're working on. But they are just as anxious to get that done and out of here as we are as anxious to get them out of here also. So that's moving forward. As far as upcoming events, we have the Get Down Downtown this Friday out here on Independence Lane. Of course, Farmers Market every Sunday. Next one's March 5th. Movie in the Park on March 11th. Saturday, March 11th, Independence Square is Toy Story, all-time favorite, never gets old. We have Fire Department open house from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., Saturday, March 25th, Station 45. Don't forget the Maitland Jazz and Blues Festival at the end of the month, March 31st and April 1st. Again, Independence Lane, Independence Square, so we'll have 2 stages set up there. Should be a great event. Probably the biggest event that we've had in downtown, so looking forward to see how that pulls off after the disappointment last year with the weather. We have our Maitland tree giveaway, April 30th, down at Lake Lowly Park, our annual tree giveaway. So we'll be staging it the same way we've done in the past. People just line up with their cars, get in, first come, first serve, as it's always been. So people tend to line up early. Also on the horizon on April 30th is our Earth Day Farmers Market. So that's the farmers market. We step it up a little bit, have a bunch of environmentally friendly things going on there. Hopefully we're going to be giving away the composting bins again, having some classes. We're reaching out to some auto dealers to get some EVs out there so people can see what's going on in the EV market. A lot of extra events going on at that farmers market, so mark your calendar there. That's all I have.
Mark, is there any info we could put together for that event, the Earth-friendly one? And I'm not saying give away like any kind of lake plants, but have some information on lakes and the plants that are good for our lakes and maybe where to buy them, just any information that we could.
I hope to give a list on that. As you know, we're
booked up to here.
We're thin in the Lakes Department
right
now. So I'll give it the list on that, see what we can put together, see if we can get somebody out there.
Yeah, because like if I wanted to, and I don't even know, if I wanted to go buy some lake plants to put in, where would I buy them at? So it might just be something nice, you know?
The Lakes Division of the website has that. All the
Alright,
plants and the
there.
bed plants.
Okay.
Just a thought.
All right.
Okay, Clerk?
I should remind everybody that early voting starts Monday, the 6th. We do not host early voting at either one of our precincts here. You have to go down to the supervisor workshops. They're running it next Monday through Friday.
You gotta drive all the way down. No? Just a message.
It is. You can vote by mail, but you got your application in.
Okay. Council members, anyone? Anything? Mike?
Good.
To infinity and beyond.
Yes. Yes. Okay, good. Well, let's call it adjourned. Thank you all.
I did want to ask this, where are we with, remember I sat down with you and you looked at all the signs for the entrance signs to the city?
Oh yeah, that's that's